Good evening. I'm Michelle Sender, coming to you from the NBC News Bureau in Washington, D.C. And here are some of the stories we're following now tonight. A community mourning. We're moments away from Vice President Kamala Harris arriving in Monterey Park, California, to honor the victims of that mass shooting. It's just one of 3 mass shootings that have rocked her home state within the last week.
Who wants to bring children into a world like this? It's not right.
Strengthening commitment. President Biden commits to sending tanks to Ukraine ahead of what is expected to be a coming escalation in the region.
These tanks are further evidence of our enduring, unflagging commitment to Ukraine and our confidence in the skill of the Ukrainian forces.
Powerful storms, the same set of storms that brought tornadoes to Texas, could finally bring snow to New York. The scene of carnage. Prosecutors in South Carolina begin laying out evidence, how they say it ties an influential lawyer to the murder of his wife and son.
Neither one of them had any defensive wounds, as if they didn't see a threat coming from their attacker.
And why do classified documents keep turning up at the homes of high-level officials?
Can you assure the American people that when President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris leave office, no classified documents will walk away with them to places they shouldn't be?
Right now, we're watching for Vice President Kamala Harris in Monterey Park, California. In about 20 minutes, she will meet with families of those who were shot at a Lunar New Year celebration. The vice president is expected to lay a wreath right now on the steps of the dance hall where the shooting happened. But this isn't just Monterey Park tonight. The state is reeling from 3 mass shootings since Saturday. That includes 7 dead in a string of shootings in Half Moon Bay and one last night in Oakland, the city where Vice President Kamala Harris was born. Let's now go to Monterey Park, where NBC News correspondent Steve Patterson is following the vice president. So, Steve, thanks for being here. Tell us a bit about what is going on right now, what we know about the vice president's trip.
As you might imagine, this is her very first stop. She got off the plane not too long ago, spoke with the L.A. City Mayor, the L.A. County Sheriff, and community leaders, but she's coming right here. In fact, I can hear the helicopter above me right now, so I know she's very close. In fact, we just got maybe a 5-minute warning or so. We should see her in just a few minutes. Let me tell you about what she's going to do. Behind me, you see this growing memorial. This has been here really since day one. It has been growing and growing and growing, first starting with the flowers here and then the pictures that are now above the Star Ballroom. Those are the 11 victims that were killed in this senseless shooting. So she's expected to lay a wreath underneath there. She will do that. She will talk to the press, maybe briefly, with a few remarks, maybe her thoughts, maybe how she's feeling. Of course, this being her home state, dealing with these multiple shootings, these multiple tragedies, and what she's had to contend with to do that. And then she should be speaking to some of the families of the victims. We expect maybe she will do that at a private location. She will probably leave here, go to an undisclosed location, hear their stories, hear that shared pain that I think everybody is feeling, not only in this community, but this state, and get a sense of what they're going through, because it has been truly an awful week here for the families of those victims. So that's the plan. We should expect to see her really within the next few minutes, Yamish.
And you talk about shared pain. I mean, there were those moving images of people holding candles. You can feel the heartbreak there. How is the community coming together to heal or to try to heal after such a horrific shooting?
You know, it's very difficult, and holding the candles is one of the ways. We've heard of multiple candlelight vigils, obviously here at this scene, but really spread out throughout Monterey Park. They're, coming together to pray, coming together to pay their respects. We know that there's been a donation page set up for some of the families of the victims here as well. And they're just trying to make sense of all of this. The part of the problem, though, Yamish, is that there still is no motive from police, from investigators. They're still looking into why this happened, especially with the date and the time. This was on the Lunar New Year in a community where that is such a culturally important time, in a community that is 65% Asian American, the AAPI community, very hurt by this senseless shooting. And so that is all sort of part of the healing process. Everybody's sort of trying to make sense of it together, but it's been very, very difficult. We spoke to some people at one of those vigils just about how they're feeling. Here's what they said.
I am finding it really difficult to be hopeful about the future. I think that's where I'm at. You know, there's been so much violence in the last few years, and we've just had to sit with it, and it doesn't feel like things are getting better.
So again, very difficult, this community in so much pain. And again, until investigators release a reason why, I think it's going to take a long time for this healing process to really fully complete. But they are working on it, obviously. I can hear, I think now over my left shoulder, the vice president should be arriving at any point. You know, as soon as she does, of course, Yamiche, we'll let you know. Back to you.
Yeah, and I can just hear the pain in that person's voice saying it doesn't feel like it's getting any better because there have been so many mass shootings.
And Yamiche, she is coming now. If you're still with me, we're going to pan over. That is her. Believe in that black vehicle. Part of that motorcade now pulling up as we speak. I'm going to step off so you can see her. And she should be hopping out as soon as they pull up here. It's going to be one of these vehicles. We're not sure which one. The second vehicle I'm hearing, or the one closest to me, is what I'm hearing at this point. Secret Service, of course, doing a sweep of this area. They've been on this scene for quite some time, making sure it is safe and secure, and making sure she has a pathway to that memorial, again, that has been really growing since minute one here, since police were able to clear this scene. That horrible shooting on Saturday night took the lives of 11 victims. It was 10, and then it grew to 11. Of course, the vice president hearing about all of this, we heard when the White House was informed of the shooting, and their messages of condolences almost immediately. And obviously now she wants to pay her respects. The press corps kind of gathering and moving around the vehicle, as you might imagine. She should be expected to be coming out at any time. And we're hearing that she may make a few remarks to the press, maybe in regards to the amount of shootings, not only in the state of California over the last few days, but in this country over the last year. There's almost more shootings than there have been days this year. And so it's a very difficult situation that she's dealing with. But we should expect to hear from her at any minute, Yamiche.
It certainly is a difficult situation, and you think about the fact that President Biden often finds himself having to be the consoler-in-chief, and she is, of course, the vice president who has had to take on that role with him. And it looks like the doors are opening, so hopefully we'll see her shortly here.
Yep, there she is, stepping out. Again, what we've heard from the White House and from her press team is that she is expected to lay a wreath at the memorial. There it is. Bouquet of flowers as she walks over. She walks past several flowers that have been laid at the foot of the Star Ballroom, one of the true community centers, part of the fabric of this community, a place that people would gather to have fun, to dance, and especially on the Lunar New Year, where so many were gathered. She's now in front of the faces of those 11 victims, reading some of the notes that have been left there, notes of condolence, and notes of who they were and what they represented in this community. The victims, ages 57 to 76, these were grandfathers and grandmothers, elders and pillars of their community. These were people that had influenced so many generations. And she's paying her respects. She will go to each one of the faces. And part of the reason we've heard she's here is to sort of learn about the victims, to learn their stories, to really know who they were. And understanding that the pain that the families are going through.
And Steve, this is a tough thing to watch, but it's also become a familiar scene. As we know, we've seen so many mass shootings just this year.
Yeah, I mean, and these are places often, Yamiche, that don't experience of course, nobody should experience this level of violence, but some of the safest places in the country. I covered a shooting in Boulder, Colorado Springs, Half Moon Bay. I don't think anybody would think of that as a place of violence. Here, voted one of the safest and best places to raise a family, Monterey Park, California. So I think it's more difficult, of course, for people to deal and to understand why this has happened. Part of that, of course, is having a reason why and having a motive. And that's why investigators have been working so hard, working around the clock to try to get to the bottom of that as she lays her wreath down in front of the gate, in front of the Star Ballroom. She will come over to make remarks, and then again, she will probably jet off to meet some of those families, to meet the hero that stopped the gunman at the second location, the Lili Ballroom. I don't believe we can hear her, and I'm not sure we have a microphone over there, but that is what her plan is. Image.
Sorrow, violent and tragic, and useless thing that happened here. On behalf of the President, Dr. Biden, Doug, and myself, we express what I know our nation feels in terms of mourning the loss of those who died and were killed here, and of course pray for the recovery of those that were injured. You know, we've already had in our country this year already, we're in January, it's estimated over 40 mass killings already. And tragically, we keep saying the same thing. I have had the unfortunate experience of visiting many of these sites, and sometimes within days of a massacre like this. We will always, as a compassionate nation, mourn for the loss and pray for those who survive and are recovering. But we must also require that leaders in our nation who have the ability and the power and the responsibility to do something, that they act. California has been courageous as a leader on the issue of smart gun safety laws, but we also need Congress to act, because truly if we are to have a uniform approach that is a statement of where we as a nation, I think, where we are on these issues, then Congress must act so that we can get at least one step closer to what is right and what is reasonable, understanding that to do so is to fully support the Second Amendment, but to understand we need reasonable gun safety laws in our country. So I'm here again to express the sentiments of the President, First Lady, and Second Gentleman in our country. I will be meeting with some of the families. I've met with the sheriff and the county supervisor and the mayor, and I will meet with some of the first responders. But again, to all of those who are here covering this tragedy, continue to also cover the importance of requiring elected officials and leaders to have courage to do the right thing when it comes to just what is reasonable and right. Thank you all.
Can this Congress do anything?
Thank you all. They absolutely can.
You think they can accomplish?
They have the power to. Can they do something? Yes. Should they do something? Yes.
Will they?
Will they do something? That is where we all must speak up and speak to our elected representatives about what we have a right to expect that they will do in the interest of the safety, the security, and the well-being of people like those whose lives were ended here and people around our country. They can, yes. Okay, Paul, we got to
Thank you, Madam Vice President.
And that was the Vice President, Kamala Harris, visiting the scene of yet another mass shooting. She said that she was there to express the condolences and say that both her as well as the president were praying for the families. She also said that while she's praying, she also needs people and leaders in particular to act. She said that this is that they need reasonable gun safety laws. She also said she's going to be meeting with families as well as first responders. A tough scene there. She was both talking about the sadness of the moment while also saying that there needs to be more done. And she said, will Congress act? That's a big question. She said, should they act? Yes. So I think we have Steve Patterson still with us there. Steve, if you're still there, I'm wondering if you could talk a bit about how the vice president's, how her visit is being received and the idea that she's both talking about mourning the loss of these people and marking their lives while also demanding action.
Yeah, and I think it's important that people hear that. I think people really needed to hear that something is being done. Of course, you know, the counter argument to that is that we often always hear something of that nature, that there is a tragedy, that there is a call for action, that action doesn't occur, and that we then reset to normal. But I think her being here, her presence, being that this is her home state, in a state that I should mention with one of the strictest gun laws, if not the strictest gun laws in the country, and this is happening repeatedly so many times. One of the things that I was hearing from Half Moon Bay, the other shooting that was just a day later, is that from our friend correspondent Jake Ward, is that there was some thinking that this was maybe a copycat shooting, that maybe one person had heard about this shooting and repeated the same thing. According to Jacob, that's not true at all. It was coincidental. These shootings are happening so often and so clustered that they just happen to coincidentally overlap. And so to hear from her, especially, you know, in a place that is in so much pain right now, I think it is important. Even if that message sounds like it is often repeated, it's important to repeat that message. She's now going to meet with those families. That's important as well. So the vice president doing all she can. Back to you.
And Steve, politics aside, it's really hard as an American to think that we've had more mass shootings than days, and it's January. Thank you so much for your reporting.
Yeah.
And while Monterey Park searches for answers, Half Moon Bay is looking for accountability. Today, the alleged shooter was arraigned on 7 counts of first-degree murder, then 1 count of first-degree attempted murder. He did not enter a plea. While that happened, a memorial in Redwood City started growing. Members of the community left candles, flowers, and stuffed animals. NBC's Nayela Charles is now with us. So, Nayela, tell us what happened in court today.
Well, Yamish, the judge pushed the arraignment to mid-February to give the defense enough time to look over the details of the case since they were just appointed today. In court, the defendant was shaking, kept on touching his face, and he did not enter a plea, like you mentioned. The DA's, though, saying that there's no bail here because of the egregious nature of this crime and also because the defendant is a Chinese national. This is what the DA said after the hearing.
So this one is in a category that is way beyond anything we've ever dealt with. I'm sorry that we have joined the list of counties around this country that have had to deal with this.
The DA says the death penalty is on the table here, although experts say that is a rare feat in the state of California. The DA, though, saying that they will finalize that decision in the coming months. Yamish?
And Nayela, I wonder if you could talk a bit more about the suspect and the potential motive here. We know that he didn't enter a plea deal, but what more do we know about him?
Well, the DA's office is not releasing a possible motive, though they do say they have one. They say the reason for that is because they don't want to change the integrity of this case, though we do know that the defendant spoke to investigators telling them that his co-workers for years disrespected him leading up to the shooting. That's from 2 police sources with direct knowledge of the investigation who spoke to NBC Bay Area. And all of the victims here, agricultural workers, either Hispanic or Asian, who at some point worked with the defendant, all of them here to pursue the American dream, instead becoming a victim to another case of American gun violence. Yamish?
Just another scene of a heartbreaking situation. Nayela Charles, thank you so much. Now to the war in Ukraine. President Volodymyr Zelensky is receiving a much-needed boost on the battlefield in the form of tanks. Today, President Biden announced the U.S. will send 31 Abrams tanks to Kyiv. The U.S. will also provide a training program to maintain and operate the machinery. Meanwhile, Germany says it will deliver 14 of its own Leopard tanks. Chancellor Olaf Scholz says it is, quote, it is a first step, opening the door for other European countries to pitch in. Russia is denouncing the move, calling it a, quote, blatant provocation. President Biden pushed back on those claims, insisting that there are not offensive weapons.
With spring approaching, Ukrainian forces are working to defend the territory they hold and preparing for additional counteroffensives. To liberate their land, they need to be able to counter Russia's evolving tactics and strategy on the battlefield in the very near term.
Officials from both the United States and Germany previously expressed doubt about sending the tanks. Our partners at Sky News captured the moment when President Zelensky first learned of the change of heart.
Я вдячний в цілому світу за підтримку України. Але якщо ми говоримо відкрито з вами і чесно, то кількість танків і термін, коли вони можуть до нас доїхати, мають невід'ємну, а важливу роль.
NBC's Courtney Cuby joins me now from the Pentagon. So, to Zelensky's point, how soon are these tanks expected to arrive on the front lines?
No time soon, to be honest. So when we're talking about the Abrams tanks, the announcement that the White House made today, those aren't going to arrive in Ukraine for many, many months. And that's because there's a procurement process. As you mentioned, there's the training. Now, keep in mind, the U.S. can train the Ukrainian military on these, which will take several months. But while these actual tanks that they're going to get are being built and procured and shipped over to Ukraine. But even with that, it's going to be months before they arrive on the battlefield. The key here is this announcement today opened the door for other nations to provide tanks that they can get onto the battlefield much faster, like the German Leopard tanks. The Brits have already announced that they're going to send some Challengers. The hope here, according to the U.S. administration officials who I've spoken with, is that with this announcement today, some of these other allies who have Leopards and other tanks in the region will flood them in so that they're actually there on the battlefield with Ukrainians using them by the time the spring counteroffensive actually begins, Yumish.
And Courtney, it's so smart to underscore sort of how long it's going to take to get these. But as recently as Friday, right, U.S. officials were telling NBC News that these tanks would not be going to the Ukraine. And they were saying that they had concerns over the time it would take to train Ukrainian troops as well as other things. So what changed here?
Nothing really changed about those concerns. It's still a long time to train them. The Abrams are extremely difficult to maintain. They have a very complicated logistics package. They're gas guzzlers. They are overall they are very difficult to operate. None of that has changed. But as we heard from the White House today from John Kirby, what has changed is this is going to be a tank battle going forward. The situation on the ground is what has changed. Here's what he had to say.
We never ruled tanks out. We have been, from the beginning of this war now 11 months ago, been evolving the capabilities what we're providing with Ukraine with the conditions on the ground. And so when you're to get to your specific questions, what's changed? What's changed, Kristen, are the conditions on the ground.
Okay, so we've heard a lot about ammunition shortages. That's the case particularly with Russia right now. They are short on precision-guided munitions. They're very short on artillery. It only stands to reason that the natural progression of how the war there is shaping up in the near future is a tank battle. It's no secret that Ukraine needs them. But what John Kirby didn't specifically say there is, yes, the situation on the ground has changed, but it's not that hasn't changed that the Abrams are the right tank for the situation. It's still, according to U.S. officials, they still believe that it's the Leopards that are the right tank for this battle. But again, the Germans needed to have the political top cover to actually send them, and that's why we got this announcement here today.
Well, definitely a big announcement, Courtney, and we'll have to see whether or not other European nations follow suit with Germany. But thank you so much for your reporting.
Thanks.
Let's bring in NBC News military analyst, retired Army Colonel Jack Jacobs. Thank you so much for being here. So how much do you think that these tanks will make a difference?
Well, they're going to make a difference in the spring of the summer when there's a counterattack. Tanks are not particularly good defensive weapons, but they're absolutely essential if you're going to attack strong defensive positions, which is what the Ukrainians want to do in the springtime or summer. Tanks are extremely useful, but only when used in conjunction with other arms, infantry, artillery, all kinds of support like intelligence. A combined arms attack works very, very well. And one of the things we learned from the Russian ineptitude when they sent tanks along by themselves, infantry along by themselves, is that they all got destroyed. But in a counterattack, in an attack, infantry, armor, and artillery used in conjunction can be very, very effective. Without the tanks, a counterattack by the Ukrainians would be extremely difficult, Yamish.
And I also want to ask you, as you talk about using these tanks, how concerned should folks be when it comes to training and maintenance? Because that was something that officials were using and talking about as part of their reservations for sending these tanks in the first place.
Well, you heard from Courtney exactly what the problem is. It takes a soldier 22 weeks to get trained to be a crewman on an Abrams tank. Abrams tanks don't have diesel engines. They have turbine engines, which they can run on gasoline. It's a multi-fuel engine, but by and large, it works best on jet fuel. Extremely complicated, very, very difficult to maintain. And so people will have to be trained in order to not just operate them, but maintain them as well. And I agree very strongly with Courtney that basically the commitment to send Abrams tanks was the ante. It was the only way that we could get our allies, including the Germans, to send their tanks, which are much easier to operate and will be much more effective, much easier to maintain, much more useful in the counterattack to come, Yamish.
And as you talk about their usefulness, a spokesman for Russia, he's saying that these tanks that they might not be as helpful and as important to the fight for Ukraine as people think. He said in part, these tanks will burn down just like the other ones. What do you make of that, and how do you expect Russia to respond with that kind of language?
Well, they're going to try to prevent the tanks from getting there in the first place. The tanks, it's going to take them a long time. Even when they get to Europe, the fastest way to get them to Ukraine is by rail. But don't forget, rail heads, rail junctions are very easily targeted by drones, by Russian indirect fire, and so on. So they're liable to lose some of them going there. Once they're in the battle, however, if they are properly used and properly supported from the air with suppressive fire and so on, they'll be extremely useful. But I think Zelensky's right. There aren't going to be enough of them. He doesn't need 500, but he certainly needs more than the number that are being sent by the allies. But we'll see what happens when the counterattack begins in the springtime, Yamish.
Well, we will definitely see what happens. And it is not surprising that President Zelensky, who's really been saying he needs more and more and more, that he's saying right now he needs more. So thank you so much, Colonel Jack Jacobs, for your analysis.
Very welcome.
And still to come, some pretty nasty weather across the country. A look at tornadoes in the south and some snow in the northeast. That's coming after the break. It's time now for some of the big headlines we're watching tonight. A man in Germany fatally stabbed 2 people and injured 7 others on board a train today. Police say the suspect was then tackled by fellow passengers and arrested by police. His motive has yet to be determined. In California, a second missing hiker on Mount Baldy was just found safe. Search and rescue teams located 75-year-old Jin Jung yesterday after he went missing on Sunday. Mount Baldy is the same mountain where actor Julian Sands disappeared from earlier this month. Now, nearly 2 weeks into the search for Sands, crews say they still have no evidence of his current location. Investigators in Kansas say a man was killed after a dog stepped on a rifle, causing it to discharge. 30-year-old Joseph Smith was sitting in front of the passenger seat of a pickup truck when he was shot in the back. This happened on a country road just south of Wichita. According to authorities, another person was in the driver's seat but was left unharmed. And Pope Francis is criticizing anti-gay laws in a new interview, calling them, quote, unjust. He told the Associated Press being homosexual is a sin, but not a crime. The Pope says the Catholic Church can and should do more to put an end to laws criminalizing same-sex relationships. And Oregon is launching an abortion hotline offering free legal advice. The idea is modeled after similar services in New York and Delaware. People can call the anonymous hotline from any state and receive a call back from a lawyer within 48 hours. Oregon's Attorney General says, quote, this is especially important because we share a border with Idaho, which is a near total abortion ban. The same weather system that caused heavy damage along the Gulf Coast yesterday is now making its way across the southeast with the potential to affect millions of people from Florida to the Carolinas. We're talking about severe thunderstorms that could produce damaging winds and possibly a tornado. And so far this month, we've had a record-breaking number of tornado reports, over 150. And the average number of tornado reports in January is just 36. There have been more than a dozen tornado reports in the last 24 hours alone. Meanwhile, the northern tip of the storm is making its way through the Northeast right now with a wintry mix of snow and rain that could leave areas of New England under a foot of snow, which is remarkable. NBC News correspondent Gabe Gutierrez joins us now from Concord, New Hampshire, where a winter storm warning is in effect according to the National Weather Service. So what are you seeing on the ground there?
Hi there, Yamish. Well, the snow is starting to pick up here, and all this comes after another winter storm hit this area just a few days ago, Sunday into Monday. And now across this region, travel conditions are expected to deteriorate really throughout the night. And this snow is expected to mix with rain over the coming hours, and again, making travel conditions very treacherous. Now, here in New Hampshire, of course, this is a region that's used to snow, but other parts of the Northeast, Yamish, such as New York and Washington, D.C., they have not gotten, very much snowfall at all this winter. And as far as we know right now, in New York Central Park, there hasn't been any measurable snowfall from this storm. But again, further north into New Hampshire and Maine, this winter storm is expected to dump more rain and snow and powerful winds really throughout the night.
And Gabe, you call this treacherous. As someone who's from Florida, I also think it's scary. So how are residents there getting ready, and are they really ready for the snow and the rain?
Well, Yamish, as you know, you've been to New Hampshire, I'm sure, many times. They are usually very much ready for snow, so they are expected to handle it quite well here. But there does seem to be the potential for high accumulations, potentially up to a foot of snow in certain parts of New Hampshire. But as you mentioned in your introduction, this storm system really has ravaged parts of the South, including Texas, where the cleanup effort is still underway, outside of Houston, where several tornadoes touchdown there, including today the National Weather Service saying that one of them was an EF3 tornado packing winds of up to 140 miles an hour. And Yamish, also there's a concern of power outages in certain parts of the South. Tens of thousands of people are still without power in Arkansas, Yamish.
And Gabe, you touched on this a bit, but tell us more about the travel conditions up there, how that's going to be really impacted.
Well, overnight, it will be a very messy evening commute here across this area. Also, Boston, expect to see a little bit of snow and rain. Air travel will be heavily impacted in the Northeast. We've already seen hundreds of delays here throughout the day, according to FlightAware's Misery map, as well as dozens of cancellations. Places like Chicago and Detroit were hit hard today by some of those travel delays. And again, this storm expected to keep bringing the snow and more so rain into the morning hours tomorrow. These winter weather alerts still in effect for more than 30 million people, Yamish.
Well, Gabe, it's definitely a worrisome situation, and I hope you and, of course, all the people that are going to be affected by this, that you all stay safe. Thank you so much. And NBC News meteorologist Bill Cairns joins us now with a forecast. So what can we expect with this storm?
Oh, it's almost over, Yamish. We're close. At least we're done really with a lot of the severe weather portion. We'll be digging out of some snow tomorrow in northern New England. That'll probably be the worst of it. We only had one report of a tornado. Of course, it only takes one to have a tragedy, but thankfully this one was weak. It only damaged a carport and a shed in areas of North Florida and the Panhandle, and that's it. We haven't had any other severe weather. We still have a line of thunderstorms that's trying to exit here through eastern North Carolina, so maybe an isolated wind damage report or two, and that'll be the worst of that part. As far as the snow went, a lot of our big cities were missed by this storm or just brushed. Lubbock, Texas, and Fayetteville, Arkansas, two of the highest at 7 and 8 inches. But Chicago, St. Louis, Kansas City, Indianapolis, Oklahoma City, a lot of areas were right around 2 to 3 inches. The highest total I saw was up near Flagstaff in the Snowball, 17 inches. And how about the Ozarks? Arizona, northern Arkansas, southern Missouri, 16 inches and 12 inches. And even areas at some Texas totals, the highest I found was Matador there around a foot. So what's left of this storm? It's been snowing hard all day long in Detroit. That was probably one of the worst airports if you were involved with that today. You probably didn't get to your destination. And now a lot of the heavier stuff is in areas of northern New England. And you can see that the blue and the yellow, the blue is the snow, the yellow is where we got the heavy rain. And so Detroit looks like you're done. Chicago, some snow showers. The only heavy stuff is really left in northern New England. So additional snowfall, not much throughout the Ohio Valley, maybe an inch or two, but northern New England here. And this is great for the snowmobile country, the ski resorts. I mean, this is gold. They need this. It hasn't not been a banner winter for snow. So they'll take another 4 to 8 inches on top of the storm that they just had a couple days ago. So, yes, so this storm was a fast-moving one, but also high impact, too.
Well, Bill, though snow is good for the resorts, but I'm definitely keeping my fingers crossed that it doesn't come to D.C., so thank you so much for your reporting.
Yeah, not anytime soon.
After the break, more of the top stories we're following this hour, including a teacher who was shot by her 6-year-old student and who says the school failed to act. Plus, Meta says former President Donald Trump is being reinstated on Facebook and Instagram. That's all ahead. Stay close. And we have breaking news to report. Social media giant Meta just announced to allow former President Donald Trump back on Facebook and Instagram following a suspension that lasted a little more than 2 years. You'll remember that former President Trump was kicked off of social media platforms after the January 6th Capitol attack in 2021. At the time, they argued that Donald Trump was a risk to public safety. Tonight, in a statement to NBC News, Meta's president of global affairs, Nick Clegg, said that the company has determined that, quote, the risk has sufficiently receded. Meta says Trump will gain access to his accounts in the coming weeks. His Twitter account was reinstated back in November. And NBC News Now host Hallie Jackson joins us now for more. So, Hallie, Nick Clegg also said that there will be, quote, new guardrails in place to deter repeat offenses. What is he talking about?
Well, I just spoke with Mr. Clegg as this news was breaking, Yamiche, and that was one of the things we discussed, what those guardrails are and whether they actually have any teeth. Those guardrails include things like if the former president does violate what Facebook sees as some of the rules and policies it has in place, like let's say he lies about the upcoming election in an attempt to delegitimize it, they will work to limit the reach of some of those posts by doing things like not pull it up on a feed, perhaps, or make it tougher to be shared, not let it be shared at all, for example, so that it doesn't spread as quickly as it might have previously, if you will. The rationale here, Meta is clearly trying to balance what it sees as a need to allow public discourse, especially from politicians, people who are seeking to be leaders of countries, with the potential for incitement of real-world violence. That was part of my conversation with Nick Clegg in just the last little bit here, Yamiche, in what is a broadcast exclusive for NBC News. Let me play some of that. How can you say that in this country the risk of political violence has receded?
I think what we're essentially doing is comparing it to the circumstances which led to his 2-year suspension in the first place. In other words, the circumstances in January 2 years ago, at the time of the January 6th events on the Capitol. At that time, Washington, D.C. was under a curfew, government offices were closed and under heavy security protection up and down the country. The National Guard was being called out from state to state. That, thankfully, is no longer the case. I'm not saying everything is perfect. No one is. But we're saying that if you compare it to the circumstances which led to his original suspension, we think the risk to public safety has materially and significantly receded. But that is also the reason why we are introducing those additional guardrails to discourage him from breaking our rules going forward if he chooses to use Facebook and Instagram again.
Should we be understanding that in Meta's view, the bar is essentially insurrection-level incitement, and that's the bar that you are looking at for what is and is not a security risk?
No, we remove content all the time. We act all the time where people post material that we think will pose a real danger and lead to real-world harm. And that applies to everybody. Doesn't matter whether you're the former President of the United States, doesn't matter whether you are the king or the queen or just an ordinary user of our social media apps.
And you now have the former president, Yamiche, reacting to this news, essentially saying that he doesn't believe, Mr. Trump says, that other leaders should be treated the way that he was treated as it relates to this. We'll see what happens over the course of the next little bit. It is not out of the realm that Mr. Trump could end up suspended again for a month or even 2 years if he does create what Facebook and Meta see as real-world harm from his posts.
It's so fascinating to hear Nick Clegg talk about the fact that he thinks that the danger has decreased when there are so many people who would think that the danger has increased. You think of Paul Pelosi being beat over the head in his home and so many things that have happened. But Hallie, I want to also ask you something else, which is that former President Trump, the man that we covered together, he is someone who has started his own social media company. So I wonder, what's the likelihood that he comes back to Facebook and Instagram, given the fact that he hasn't rejoined Twitter?
It's an interesting question because you're right on the Twitter piece of it. It's somewhat complicated by, as you point out, he has his own social media site, Truth Social, where there is some reporting that he sort of has to post first on there. That's part of the agreement. Who knows how long that'll last. Facebook's a different thing, though, right? Because you know this well. In 2016, it was largely credited by his team with helping them raise money, fundraise, which is important to political campaigns, with helping them issue targeted ads, right, that were specifically targeted at various groups of potential voters that they wanted to get out and vote for former President Trump. So Facebook has a reach in that way, right? It's not just about the sheer numbers. It's not about the name recognition. Donald Trump already has all that. It's about, frankly, the money piece of it and how that could help his team as they look to get him back in the White House come 2024.
An important distinction when you think about the fact that his campaign team in 2016 ended up bringing reporters in to talk about how much Facebook had helped them. So such a thing that we will continue to follow. Thanks so much, Hallie Jackson.
Thanks, Yamiche.
New details emerged today about the shooting of the Virginia school teacher by her 6-year-old student. A lawyer for the teacher now saying there were multiple warnings and that the school should have acted.
This tragedy was entirely preventable if the school administrators responsible for school safety had done their part and taken action.
The lawyer for Abigail Zwerner, the first-grade teacher shot by a 6-year-old student, announcing she intends to sue the Newport News School District.
They failed to act and Abby was shot.
She laid out a timeline of the day of the shooting, saying late morning Zwerner went to school administrators to report that the boy had threatened to beat up another student. But she said nothing was done. About 12:30, she said a second teacher, concerned the child had a gun, searched his backpack and finding nothing, warned an administrator she believed the boy put the gun in his pocket. Then after 1 p.m., a third teacher warned of a student saying the boy in question showed him the gun at recess and threatened to shoot him if he told anyone.
Did administrators call the police? No. Did administrators lock down the school? No. Did the administrators evacuate the building? No. When a fourth employee who heard about the danger asked the administrator for permission to search the boy, he was denied.
The school district, citing an ongoing investigation, declined to comment today on the statements from Zwerner's attorney, but confirmed the assistant principal at Rich Neck Elementary School has resigned. Earlier this month, Superintendent George Parker acknowledged school officials were warned.
At least one administrator was notified of a possible weapon in the timeline that we're reviewing.
And tonight, Parker's job appears to be at risk. The published agenda for a special school board meeting lists consideration for the approval of a separation agreement with him and the appointment of an interim superintendent. Meanwhile, students are scheduled to return to classes on Monday. And Parker is, of course, now out of a job as that school board has actually moved to now hire an interim superintendent. And NBC News has learned from a source close to the situation that Zwerner texted a loved one just about an hour before she was shot, saying that the student had said he had a gun in his backpack and that school officials weren't helping. The source said the text, quote, showed her frustration. Police have said Zwerner was intentionally shot and seriously wounded in her hand and chest. And her lawyer said she is home recovering, but that a bullet remains lodged in her body. Meanwhile, the double murder trial of Alec Murdaugh is now underway. He is the former South Carolina lawyer who is accused of killing his wife and his son, Maggie and Paul, back in 2021. Today, both the defense and the prosecution delivered impassioned opening statements, prosecution leaning into the evidence they have at hand to prove Murdaugh's crime, the defense categorically maintaining his total innocence. Murdaugh comes from a powerful legal family in South Carolina, and this case has gripped the community there. He is charged with 2 counts of murder and 2 counts of possession of a weapon. NBC's Katie Beck has more.
A dramatic day of opening statements in the Murdaugh murder trial. Prosecutors saying they have the forensic evidence to convict him. Defense attorneys calling him a loving husband and father.
We'll now proceed to opening statements.
The long-awaited legal showdown in the Murdaugh murder trial.
Pow, pow. 2 shots, abdomen and the leg, and took her down.
Arguing 2 very different versions of the same story.
He didn't do it. He didn't kill Butcher, his son and wife.
Dramatic descriptions of his family's deaths at point bringing Murdaugh to tears. Opening statements given to a jury of 8 women and 4 men who will spend the next several weeks following the evidence.
They were shot at close range and they did not have defensive wounds.
Prosecutors say forensics will prove Murdaugh's guilt after a perfect storm of circumstances came to a head. The state contends Maggie was killed with a weapon owned by the family that was never recovered, and that a cell phone video captured at the murder scene just before the time of deaths puts Alec at the scene, contradicting his alibi that he only reached there when he discovered the bodies.
And he was there just minutes before, with Maggie and Paul, just minutes before their cell phones go silent forever and ever.
But the defense argues there's no forensic evidence to tie Murdaugh to the murders. No fingerprints, eyewitnesses, murder weapons, and despite the gruesome scene, no blood on Alec when police arrive.
You would be covered in blood from head to foot.
The defense argues a video taken earlier in the evening shows Paul and Alec enjoying time together, and that police pinned Alec as a suspect before investigating, even suggesting the crime may have been the work of 2 people because 2 different weapons were used.
They have pounded that square peg in the round hole, and you're going to hear about it. They've ignored some witnesses.
For the first time Wednesday, we saw several members of the Murdaugh family inside the courtroom, including Murdaugh's son, Buster. When court had adjourned, Murdaugh turned to his son and mouthed the words, "Are you okay?" His son answered yes. In Walterboro, South Carolina, I'm Katie Beck for NBC News.
It turns out that the mishandling of classified documents by high-level officials is not some one-off. Former President Donald Trump, sitting President Joe Biden, former Vice President Mike Pence, well, they've all been found to have classified material in their possession. Congress, in a very bipartisan manner, has taken note. Today, the Senate Intelligence Committee held a closed-door hearing with the Director of National Intelligence, Avril Haines, who was questioned about the mishandling of classified documents.
We got a broken system, and we got to fix this. You know, this has been kind of a problem that's been bubbling for some time. It is now playing out real time.
The intelligence community has to say, we think this is the harm, that these documents were poorly stored and were in the wrong place, and here's what we're doing to mitigate. Well, how can we judge and conduct oversight over whether their harm assessment is accurate and or whether their mitigation efforts are sufficient if we don't know what it is, what the material that was exposed potentially is?
And Matthew Connolly is a professor of history at Columbia University, and also he's the author of the forthcoming book, The Declassification Engine, What History Reveals About America's Top Secrets, and he joins us now. So, Professor, an interesting time to have a book like that coming out. Tell us a little bit about why these documents are showing up in the homes of so many top officials. How is this happening?
Well, it's happening because the government classifies all too many documents. The last time they tried to estimate how many times this was happening, they came up with numbers in the tens of millions. You know, at one point, they were estimating that every 3 seconds, some government official is classifying information. So we shouldn't be surprised when these records are showing up everywhere.
And I wonder, as you're saying that these documents are showing up everywhere, what more do you think elected officials, Congress people, of course, maybe the president himself, even though he, of course, is having his own issues, what should be done now?
Well, interestingly, Senator Rubio himself is well aware of these problems. They held hearings back in, it was more than 2 years ago, in fact, about the problems of overclassification. And they even proposed some ideas for what to do about it. Those ideas were in a classified annex to a bill. So the public wasn't even allowed to know what Congress was intending to do about it. So really, Congress has to start to act. They have to start passing legislation to deal with this problem.
And as you're talking about what Congress should do, I wonder if you could talk a bit about the different kinds of classified documents within the framework of the government. Like, is there a chance that the documents discovered in President Biden's home, was there some sort of schedule to them? Was this possibly compromising national security? What's the deal here?
Well, I think that's why we're all going to be keenly interested in following this story, because, of course, when we're dealing with secrets, you want to know what we're talking about, right? And it may be some time to come, maybe decades before we actually know. One thing that bothers me, though, is that apparently some of these documents were found in a folder that was marked personal, right? And that, to me, doesn't make sense. Why should public records, your records and mine, these belong to the American people, why were they stuck in a folder marked private?
And as you're talking about sort of those questions, I mean, I know so many Americans probably have questions here. Could you dig in a little bit more on what you see as a systematic problem here that's leading to these issues?
Yeah, the root of the problem is that the president likes to control what the rest of us are allowed to know about national security. So every president, except Donald Trump, interestingly, every single one of them has issued an executive order that's meant to control this otherwise uncontrollable system of creating secrets. But because they won't allow Congress or the courts to interfere, this system has just grown out of control. And that's why we need the other branches of government to step in and do something about it.
And quickly, do you see this as a political problem, or really do you see this as a national security problem? Meaning, which one do you think is bigger? Is it just a bad look for the United States, or is there real national security risks here?
I think we're all starting to realize that this isn't really about secrecy. This is really about accountability. This is how it is that we, the people, can hold our elected leaders to account. And I'd like to think this is beyond Republican or Democratic politics. This is really a problem for all of us.
Well, thank you so much, of course, for breaking all this down. And we'll definitely be looking out for your book, your forthcoming book, The Declassification Engine. And before we go, the story of a very sweet friendship. We may even say that these two buddies have sealed their relationship status. That's coming up. Before we go, here are your 60 seconds of joy. On Monday, a Maine Public Works employee was plowing roads in a snowstorm when they came across a scurrying seal. A police officer tried to release the seal back into the ocean, but it just kept coming back 3 times. That's when a marine rehab center captured the seal to assess it. Now healthy and hydrated, it even has a new friend, another seal. And Cincinnati Reds player Scott Rowland has been named to Major League Baseball's Hall of Fame. He shared the news in a touching moment with his parents last night.
What do we know?
Such joy. And last week, TikTok food reviewer Keith Lee was looking for a bite when he came across a struggling food truck, then realized their menu was seafood-based, and he is allergic to shellfish. The owner told him to return the next day, and he would make sure that he had something that he was not allergic to, so Lee did, and gave the food truck a rousing review 24 hours later. That led the owner of the food truck to receiving $30,000 from TikTok fans. The owner says he's grateful for all the support. And that does it for us. We'll hope to see you back here tomorrow. Until then, I'm Yamiche Sender for Now Tonight News. Continues right now.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.